I still remember the exact moment my father slapped the contract out of my hand. It didn't just fall. It flew. The paper hit the floor and slid across the marble like it didn't matter, like I didn't matter. The sound echoed in the room. Sharp. Cold. Final. For a second, no one moved. Not him. Not me. Not even the air. My fingers were still slightly raised, frozen in the position they had been in just moments ago, like I was still holding on to something that had already been taken away from me. And when I slowly looked up at him, I didn't see my father. I saw someone who had just been challenged. "You don't make decisions in this house," he said. His voice wasn't loud. That's what made it worse. It was calm. Controlled. Like this wasn't an argument. It was a reminder. I do. My throat felt dry. My chest tight. But my mind, for the first time in years, it was completely clear. I didn't grow up in a house where people yelled. There were no broken plates. No slammed doors. No loud fights. From the outside, everything looked perfect. My father was respected. People admired him. He was the kind of man others pointed to and said, "That's what success looks like." And I was his daughter. So naturally people assumed I was lucky. They didn't see the rules. They didn't see the control. They didn't see how every single part of my life was carefully designed, not by me but by him. I learned very early on that love in our house came with conditions. I was 10 years old when I first understood it. I came home one day holding a test paper. 95%. I remember how excited I was. My hands were shaking slightly as I ran into the living room. "Dad, look." He took the paper from my hand, looked at it. 2 seconds, maybe 3. Then he handed it back and said, "Where are the other 5 marks?" That was it. No smile. No good job. No pride. Just disappointment. I stood there confused, still smiling but slower now. Weaker. Because I didn't understand. 95 was good. It was more than good. But in that moment, I realized something. Good wasn't enough. From that day on, I stopped aiming for good. I aimed for perfect. And even then, it never felt like enough. As I got older, the expectations didn't go away. They grew. Friends were distractions. Focus on your future. Going out? Unnecessary. Hobbies? A waste of time unless they benefit you. Everything had to have a purpose, a result, a benefit, and if it didn't, it was removed. Slowly, without even realizing it, I stopped being a person and became a project, a version of myself that fit his expectations, not my own. I learned what to say, what not to say, when to speak, when to stay quiet, because staying quiet was easier. It avoided arguments, avoided disappointment, avoided that look he gave me when I didn't meet his expectations. That look stayed with me, more than any words ever could. So I adapted. I became what he wanted. Disciplined. Focused. Perfect. At least, on the outside. Inside, something was changing. Something small at first. Barely noticeable. A feeling. Like something was missing. Like I was living a life that looked right, but didn't feel right. I didn't have words for it back then. I just knew something wasn't mine. Years passed like that. Quietly. Predictably. Until the day everything changed. I was 22 when I got the email. I remember exactly where I was. Sitting on my bed, laptop open, half paying attention. And then I saw it. Congratulations. That word alone made my heart skip. I open the email, read it once, then again. A job offer. In another city. For a moment, everything around me faded. The walls, the room, the house. It was like I could finally breathe. Not because of the job, but because of what it meant. Freedom. A chance to leave. A chance to start over. A chance to figure out who I was without someone else deciding for me. My hands were shaking. But this time, not from fear, from excitement. For the first time in years, I felt something real. Hope. I stood up, started pacing, smiling, thinking about all the possibilities, what my life could look like, what I could become. For a moment, I forgot about him. And then reality came back. I had to tell him. That thought alone made my chest tighten again. Because deep down, I already knew this wasn't going to be easy. But a small part of me still hoped, still believed, maybe this time would be different. Maybe he'd see it. Maybe he'd understand. Maybe he'd finally let go. So that evening, I walked into the living room. He was sitting exactly where he always sat, reading, calm, unbothered. "Dad," I said. My voice was steady, careful. He didn't look up. I got a job offer. That got his attention. He lowered the paper slightly, looked at me. "Where?" I hesitated for just a second, then said it. "In another city." Silence. Not the peaceful kind, the heavy kind. And then, "No." Just one word. No question. No discussion. Just, "No." My heart dropped. I haven't even explained. "You don't need to," he cut in. "You're not going." Something inside me tightened. "But this is a good opportunity," I said, trying to stay calm. "I worked really hard for this." "That's not the point." "Then what is the point?" I asked quietly. And that's when he looked at me. Really looked at me. "The point," he said slowly, "is that you don't get to decide things like this." My chest felt heavy. "I'm not a child anymore," I said. That was a mistake. The moment the words left my mouth, I knew it, because his expression changed. Not angry, not loud, worse, cold. "You live in my house," he said, "which means you follow my rules." And just like that, everything became clear again. Nothing had changed, and nothing was going to. That night, I sat in my room, alone. No tears, no anger, just silence. And for the first time in my life, I asked myself a question I had been avoiding for years. What do I want? Not what he wanted. Not what others expected. Me. And the answer came quietly, but clearly. I want to leave. The thought didn't scare me. That's what surprised me the most. It didn't feel reckless. It didn't feel impulsive. It felt right. For years, I had been living inside a life that was carefully controlled. Every decision filtered. Every step approved. Every dream digested. And now, for the first time, I was thinking about a life where none of that existed. But wanting something, and actually doing it, were two very different things. Because this wasn't just about leaving a house. This was about breaking a system. And systems like that don't let go easily. If I tried to leave openly, he would stop me, not with force, not with anger, but with control, money, pressure, family, guilt. He knew exactly how to make people stay. So I made a decision. I wouldn't fight him. I would outplay him. The next morning, I acted normal, calm, quiet, like nothing had changed. At breakfast, I sat across from him like I always did. "Did you think about what I said?" he asked casually. "Yes," I replied. He looked up, waiting. "I understand," I said. And just like that, the tension disappeared. He nodded, satisfied, because in his mind, he had won. That was the moment everything shifted. Not on the outside, but inside me. Because now, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was planning. Every day after that, I played my role perfectly. The obedient daughter. The one who didn't argue, didn't question, didn't resist. But behind that calm surface, everything was changing. I accepted the job. Secretly. I didn't celebrate. Didn't tell anyone. I just stared at the confirmation email and felt something settle inside me. This was real now. There was no going back. I started saving money. Small amounts at first. Nothing noticeable. I cut down on everything. No unnecessary spending. No risks. Every dollar had a purpose now. Freedom. Packing was harder. I couldn't just throw everything into a suitcase. That would be too obvious. So I did it slowly. One item at a time. A book. A jacket. A pair of shoes. Things he wouldn't notice. Things that wouldn't raise questions. And every time I packed something, I felt it. That quiet excitement. Like I was building something in secret. A way out. But it wasn't easy. There were moments, late at night, when doubt crept in. What if I fail? What if I can't handle it? What if he's right? Those thoughts were loud, persistent, because they weren't new. They were his voice, living in my head. And for a moment, I almost believed them. But then I'd remember something. The way I felt when I read that email. Alive. And that feeling was stronger than fear. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. And through all of it, I stayed patient, careful, consistent. Because one mistake, one wrong move, and everything could fall apart. He was observant. He noticed small changes. And if he suspected something, he would start asking questions. So I gave him nothing. No signs. No hints. Just the same version of me he had always known. Controlled. Predictable. Safe. But inside, I was counting down. Every day felt heavier. Not because I was stuck, but because I knew I wouldn't be for long. And that made everything harder. Because once you see a way out, staying feels impossible. There was one moment I'll never forget. We were sitting in the living room. He was talking about my future, the plans he had made, the path he had chosen. And I just sat there, listening, nodding. But inside, I felt nothing. No agreement. No connection. Just distance. Because for the first time, his plans didn't include me anymore. Not the real me. And that's when I knew I was already gone. Physically, I was still there. But mentally, I had left. The final week came faster than I expected. Everything was ready. Money saved. Job confirmed. Bag packed. All that was left was the moment. The night before, I couldn't sleep. Not from fear. From anticipation. My mind kept replaying everything. Every step. Every detail. Making sure nothing was missing. Because this wasn't just a decision. It was a turning point. A line I could never uncross. And I was ready. Morning came quietly. Before sunrise. The house was still. Silent. I sat on my bed for a moment, looking around. Not at the walls. Not at the furniture. At the memories. Years of my life. Spent trying to be someone I wasn't. And for the first time, I didn't feel trapped. I felt free. I stood up. Picked up my bag. Walked to the door. Paused. Just for a second. Not because I was unsure, but because I knew this was the last moment everything would ever feel the same. And then I opened the door. And for a moment, I just stood there. The hallway looked exactly the same as it always did. Quiet. Still. Familiar. But it didn't feel the same. Because this time, I wasn't walking through it as someone who belonged there. I was leaving it behind. I stepped out. Closed the door softly. No noise. No drama. Just an ending. The air outside felt different. Cool. Light. I took a deep breath. And for the first time in my life, it didn't feel like I needed permission. I walked away. No looking back. Not because I didn't care, but because I knew if I looked back, I might hesitate. And hesitation was something I couldn't afford anymore. The first few hours didn't feel real. Everything felt distant. Like I was watching my own life from the outside. The taxi ride. The airport. The people around me. All of it blurred together. But one thing stayed clear. I was free. My phone started ringing halfway through the drive. I didn't need to check. I already knew who it was. I let it ring. Again. And again. Then messages started coming in. Where are you? Call me right now. What do you think you're doing? Each message sharper than the last. I read them. Every single one. And with each one, something inside me shifted. Not fear. Distance. Because for the first time, his words didn't control how I felt. They were just words. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Not because I was scared of what he'd say, but because I knew if I responded, I'd be stepping back into the same cycle. And I was done with that. Completely done. By the time I reached my new place, the calls had stopped. Not because he gave up, but because he was waiting. Waiting for me to come back. To apologize. To explain. But I wasn't going to do any of that. The apartment was small, simple, nothing like the house I had left behind. But the moment I stepped inside, I felt something I had never felt before. Peace. Not loud, not overwhelming, just quiet, steady. Mine. The first few days were hard, not because I regretted leaving, but because I wasn't used to this kind of freedom. Every decision felt unfamiliar. What to eat, when to sleep, how to spend my time. Things that most people don't even think about felt new to me. And sometimes that scared me, because for so long, I had someone else making those choices. But slowly, that fear started turning into confidence. I built routines, created structure, not because someone told me to, but because I wanted to. And that made all the difference. Weeks passed, then months. I started growing, not just in my job, but as a person. I spoke more, laughed more. I became someone I actually liked. And the best part? I did it on my own terms. The messages from home slowed down. Not completely, but enough for me to breathe. Occasionally, I'd still get something. Short. Controlled. Call me. But I didn't. Because I wasn't ready. Not yet. Then one day, something changed. I started hearing things. From relatives. From family friends. Your dad mentioned you. He said you're working now. He sounded proud. That word hit differently. Proud. For years, I had chased that, worked for it, sacrificed for it. And now, it came when I wasn't even trying. That's when I understood something. It was never about what I did. It was about control. And the moment I stepped out of it, everything changed. A few weeks later, my phone rang. I looked at the screen. His name. I stared at it. Longer than I expected. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. I was calm. And that's how I knew I was ready. I answered. Silence. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then finally, he said, I heard you're doing well. His voice was different. Quieter. Not commanding. Not controlling. Just normal. I leaned back slightly. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I said. Simple. Calm. No explanation. No justification. Just truth. There was a pause. Like he was waiting for more. But there was nothing else to say. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to prove anything. Not to him. Not to anyone. I had already proven it to myself. And that was enough. We didn't argue. We didn't fight. The conversation ended quietly. But something had shifted. Not in him. In me. Because I realized something powerful. I didn't need revenge. Not the kind that hurts someone. Not the kind that destroys. Because the real revenge was this. Living a life he could no longer control. Becoming someone who didn't need his approval. Standing in a place where his words didn't define me anymore. That was the victory. Not loud. Not dramatic. But undeniable. And sometimes, the strongest revenge isn't about getting back at someone. It's about outgrowing the version of you they tried to keep small, and walking away, without looking back, because you finally understand you were never meant to stay.